So, Ken Fermin and Zach Wilson with me now. And Zach is just returned from hell, also known as Carolina. And yes, I stole that from the Dukies because now we got reason to hate them. The North Carolina Tar Heels, top seed in the NCAA Women's Lacrosse Tournament, number 1 all year long. Already, they beat us early in the year, had a lead. They came back. They move on. Women's lacrosse is done. And the glass ceiling to the Final Four remains. And that really has to get Joe Spallina's goat, and just about everybody else in the team too, because of the fifth-year seniors who stayed specifically because they felt like this could be the year they broke through.
Yeah, broke through they have, Matt. And really,
well, they didn't break through. That's the problem. They did not get to the Final Four. They've come close. Maryland stopped them a couple of years back. Then, of course, North Carolina doing. And
Boston a couple years ago.
Yep. So this has been a source of frustration for the program because of the level of talent it's had. And now, of course, the traditionalists in the women's lacrosse sorority and fraternity, there are, of course, Joe Spallina and the men in there too. The traditionalists will all say, Stony Brook doesn't play anybody. We're not going to respect them in terms of seedings. They can be number 1 all year, but all they're going to get is a 5th seed. They can be loaded with Tewaaraton candidates. They're going to get an 8 seed because they don't play anybody, because the America East is weak and they have won it 8 straight times. And then they get to the quarterfinals and get stopped, which unfortunately proves them right. That's the thing that has to get everybody's goat at Stony Brook, that this glass ceiling, at some point they're going to do it. They haven't yet. And that's been, I think, a sore point. It's going to be a sore point with everybody involved with the program until they finally do.
Yeah, and, I think the thing is, there's a lot that this program has accomplished, obviously, and you're right, that's kind of the biggest carrot that this program hasn't been able to achieve yet. The women's lacrosse team has done so many things under Joe Spallina's tenure, obviously winning conference title, doing it 8 times in a row, setting streak after accolade, having the best players in lacrosse history on your roster, Courtney Murphy, Kylie O'Miller, Carrie Mitchell, and even now, Valley Kennedy, Terrell Miller, and all of that wasn't enough to get them in the Final Four. So you're right, in that sense, for sure. At the same time, though, I think there's a lot to be proud of this team, especially this year, where they finished 16-3, and those 3 are losses at the hands of the 2 best teams in the NCAA right now, in Syracuse and North Carolina twice.
Yeah, and we've seen over time and time, again, as Matt continued to say, that even though because of the schedule during the season, that Stony Brook doesn't get to there, it's when playoff mode comes that Stony Brook really starts to live up to the challenge. Like, we've really seen that this Stony Brook team, as a playoff team over the last few years, has really made the competition heated up for every team that they faced. The ones that they have beaten, completely big time, especially when they pretty much took down Rutgers in a big fashion last weekend by getting more than 10-goal win in that game. And then all of a sudden you're playing against UNC and you've almost learned from your mistakes. I mean, you give up the same amount of goals, but your offense has appeared to make an improvement. And really, when you do have the ability most of the time to get your revenge, and Stony Brook has been close in the past. And we've known that this also has been a bit of an issue for Stony Brook against top teams. Like, they start off early with the lead, but then they eventually give it up. And they did have that same thing against North Carolina early this season when Stony Brook started with a 2-0 lead, but then North Carolina got the lead back and never relinquished it. But this second half, you got to give props to Stony Brook no matter what, because they put the Tar Heels in a position that they weren't really familiar with all season long. Despite being a consensus number one team all season long, the only thing that they haven't really worried about up to this point was facing a deficit with less than 10 minutes to go in the game. I've seen North Carolina, and they've had leads within the last 10 minutes of a game throughout like every
game this year. Yeah, and kind of going back to Pat's point, first one is looking at the Final Four, both men's and women's programs. It's tough if you're not a power team to get there, just because on the basis of it, look at all of the things all the other schools can provide, and you compare it to Stony Brook, in terms of what you got there. And it's for what Stony Brook has, it's pretty good, especially in the America East, in terms of the facilities you can use. They built the indoor practice facility that's being used now. It's recent for the last couple of years. They updated things like the locker rooms. They have turf fields, things like that. But again, you look at these teams, North Carolina, Virginia, Maryland, Duke, Boston College, Syracuse, Northwestern, UNC again for the women's tournament. And, the key with all of those teams is those are power teams. Those are teams where you say the school's name, they're a real deal. And to Stony Brook, while the brand is there for the women's lacrosse side, that being their main ticket and loan ticket for that matter, is kind of hurting this team in the long run in terms of recruits. And you look at that, and for what this team has done with the players they got in, it was highlighted in that New York Times article by Joe Spallina. There's a portion of these players for the Seawolves where they aren't the top recruits. They're often overlooked by these power teams like Duke, like Maryland, like a UNC, and they're taken in Stony Brook and given the opportunity to shine. We saw it on the men's side with Dylan Tolonetti, who got no playing time as a freshman, transferred over to Stony Brook, and became the America East Player of the Year. So, that's always, I think, going to be a barrier for the Stony Brook team. So it's impressive they're able to accomplish so much in spite of these limitations of the brand.
Yeah, and I think what's also been one thing to note is that it can take time probably to get your way there. And I've seen all over social media that many people believe Stony Brook, within the next few years, are eventually going to be able to hoist the title on championship weekend. And when you're able to be a head coach long enough, your team eventually gets to the pinnacle of its program for Jenny Levy is one of the best head coaches in the nation in women's lacrosse over for quite a while. This is her 26th season with the team. She has been there since 1996, I believe. And the fact is, North Carolina did not win their first national championship since 8 years ago. So it took her just almost 20 years after head coaching to finally get the Tar Heels to where they wanted to be, and look where they are today. So the matter is, a lot of people at Stony Brook continue to respect everything that Joe Spallina has done to bring these local Long Island prospects to stay where they are and be at Stony Brook, to be close to home and really feel that energy. Spallina stays with this program long enough, and I really do believe that this team will have something to look at. He needs to take a page out of Jenny Levy's book, which is that you may not see something big for the team that you'll remember too much for a little while, but you will get there.
They're going to keep trying. They're going to keep recruiting. They're going to keep building strong teams. But
yeah, and I've already seen what
one
the
thing I
future
don't
holds.
agree with. I'm not saying that either of you guys mentioned this, but the whole you don't play anybody thing. First of all, their non-conference schedule's as tough as anybody's, and number two, North Carolina it could be argued they don't play anybody either because they're so much better than everybody else. I mean, you play your Floridas, you play your USCs, you play your established programs, and you beat them. And then, of course, you go to the America East schedule and you don't lose for 5 years. But the point is, whenever they've been challenged, they've risen to the challenge. And even in defeat, the games that they played in the NCAA tournament have been close. They haven't been blown out.
Yeah, I think really that maybe the Maryland game, 14-7, you could argue that was the blow. But even then, it was only 7-goal loss.
Maryland was the eventual champion.
And that, too, that's another point as well, yeah.
Okay. So if North Carolina wins it all, that loss is definitely going to look a lot better.
And let me just say, judging by how they looked all season, I'd be stunned if anyone beat them. I know Syracuse, Northwestern, 2 great teams. But, I mean, this is like, the pinnacle of women's lacrosse right here. It's like you get the best of the best in the nation all under one roof. And, I mean, wow. And we saw it in the game.
Yeah,
we saw it in the game yesterday. That I was going to touch on right now. Jamie Ortega, 4 goals, 3 assists. Katie Hoag, 1 goal, but 5 assists. So even though she wasn't getting to the back of the net, she was still being the tremendous playmaker all over the.
I also like to point out, too, that Ortega and Katie Hodge are also Long Island products. Jamie Ortega coming from Mattatuck and Katie Hodge from Centerbridge. So we continue to see this every week with men's and women's lacrosse, is that Long Island is probably the best place in the nation if you want to build a dynasty lacrosse team on either the men's or the women's side. You get
Maryland isn't bad.
You get Courtney Murphy out of it. You get Ortega and Hodge out of it. Taylor Marino, one of the best goalies in the nation at Stony Brook, had to face up against yesterday, and pretty much a rare moment for a team like Stony Brook where they forced Marino to have more goals allowed than saves. Marino had 8 saves, but did allow 11 goals. She has made more saves than goals allowed all season long. So you really see how that is a big step up, and why, really, Tar Heels fans could not really feel like they had the certainty to win this game until there was like 5 minutes left to go.
Yeah, no, it was a close game through and through. And again, as you said, you're right, ties the most that she surrendered this season as well. Obviously, she surrendered 11 against Duke in the regular season
finale. And that was a 1-goal game. North Carolina barely won that one.
You see, that's the great thing about it. Like you keep saying. Stony Brook's talent level, they're capable. They could have won that game. A couple of breaks go their way. They could have won.
It's amazing because every quarterfinal game, all 3 of their quarterfinal games they have played in program history, they have really looked like they could have won each one. The first one against Maryland, they were very close to winning, but gave up that lead to the Terrapins in the end. That second one against Boston College, when Stony Brook was number 1 in the nation despite being the 5 seed, and really close Kylie O'Miller was with within a minute to go in regulation to getting the game-winning goal. And then this one right here, as we said, Stony Brook was up by 2 with just about 7 minutes left to go. And then North Carolina went on a 5-goal run, but still.
That was a difference maker, too.
Come along, and we really have noticed that as long as we've been here.
Agreed. And, going back to that, too, that was the difference maker because for the most part, again, at that point, they really limited Jamie Ortega. I believe she only had a couple of goals at that point. Katie Hodge as well, didn't have too many assists. But, that was the thing there where the Tar Heels were able to get 5 different goal scorers on each of those goals. And they were able to do it from different points, too, inside, in the right lane, at the top slot. And that was really the breaking point for the Seawolves, is that the Tar Heels overwhelmed them offensively and were finally able to create some space. And that ended up being the difference maker. And you're right, it's just one of those things, again, where I say it every broadcast, but it's a testament to Joe Spalina. You stack goals, you win the game. And that's what the Tar Heels were able to do. And for the Seawolves, they just ran out of gas there at the end, I think. And that was the difference maker between them making it and missing it. But again, to do it against the best team in the nation, one of the greatest lacrosse teams of all time, is nothing short of remarkable.
And each team remaining in the women's lacrosse tournament who is in the Final Four has their reasons to win the national championships. But North Carolina is exactly what Stony Brook experienced themselves. That big-time attacker tandem of Jamie Ortega and Katie Hodge can really lift this North Carolina offense that's pretty much been the hottest in the nation. Then you get the 2 seed in the Northwestern Wildcats, who have been faced with multiple deficits this season, but have stormed back, including the one where they were down early against Duke, but then Izzy Skane, who has been one of the most notable players in the nation, along with being a Tewaaraton Award finalist, lifting Northwestern to a smacking 21-10, 20. I think they got the 20 burger in that game against Duke. Then you get the 3-seed Syracuse Orange, who, despite facing multiple injuries this year, like losing Emily Hawerschuk and Meg Carney, still get other players like Sam Schwartz and Asia Goldstock to lead them, and they were able to take down a Florida team that was really just smacking their opponents in the first 2 rounds of the tournament. With that win over Mercer and the revenge win against Jacksonville, just really put the walls up on the Gators once and for all, the Orange did. And last but not least, Boston College, the 4th seed, who will be playing against North Carolina on Friday. Boston College, there's only one reason why they are in, and that's because of Charlotte North. And really, that compass of hers just continues to go in that one direction. And she has been just on a tear over the last seasons. And she can really do damage to North Carolina's defense if she wanted to. I've seen that out of her.
Yeah, that direction is all the way up because you're right. She's a big part of that offense. And
best player for Boston College since Sam Apuzzo, I have to say that.
It is absolutely incredible. Again, as an individual, for sure, she wouldn't be out of place on that North Carolina team and that North Carolina is that. But again, I think that's the difference, too, just kind of going forward for North Carolina. Is all these other teams, late in the season, they're struggling with injuries. For the most part, North Carolina's been able to go through pretty healthy, and they've been able to play their style of lacrosse every game. They haven't had other teams have to adjust to their tempo really at any point this season, at least for an elongated period of time. And I think that's going to be a difference maker. North Carolina keeps finding ways to control the ball. And even when they're not winning the draw controls, like they did against Stony Brook, Stony Brook actually won the draw control battle 15-12. They were still able to force a change in possession by scooping up so many more turnovers. It's that midfield that makes it so dangerous because instead of the ball going either way, UNC ensures it stays in their stick. And I think that's something Stony Brook can look on and improve on as well in the future, is that sort of play style where, instead of of getting your defense set at the defensive zone, you have them fight for those possessions, those loose ball battles there at midfield, which Seawolves don't really often do unless they're trailing or the game is close late.
I might be very interested next weekend to see how the Final Four plays out. Of course, the first game is on Friday, as we said, but the only problem could be is that we might be busy doing our own Stony Brook baseball broadcast, depending on what time it'll be that day. I mean, no matter what they'll be playing on Friday, it's just a matter of when they'll be going beyond that. We'll probably get what time. We'll be definitely getting into Stony Brook baseball after we finish up our segment with women's lacrosse.
Yeah, and with that, baseball 11:30 or 2:30 Friday. We'll see, depending on Thursday's game. But really, for now, I think it's a good time to kind of reflect on the Seawolves season. Well, we kind of did that already. 16-3. Your only 3 losses are to the 2 best teams in the nation. And really, I think the big thing is looking forward to 2022. The big issue is going to be you're without Taryn O'Miller, you're without Allie Kennedy. It's kind of reflective of that 2018 season. You're without Courtney Murphy, you're without Kylie O'Miller. What are you going to do?
Well, I've seen what the future holds for Stony Brook, and I'm pretty impressed with who is going to be probably stepping up. Bridget Considine is going to have one more season with the team next year, so she'll probably be in that same position that Taryn O'Miller was. You get more midfielders trying to be the player that Allie Kennedy was in her collegiate career with Stony Brook, and pretty much a player that really started to rise up and shown herself probably to be a future Allie Kennedy could be Ellie Macera, who had a couple of goals against the Tar Heels yesterday. I think one of those 2 came off a free position goal.
Right.
And then along with her, Siobhan Rafferty, if I'm not mistaken, she's going to be entering this next season as a redshirt senior since she couldn't play last season due to a torn ACL. That allows her to redshirt. Then you also get Jane Hampel, who has been trading those draw control battles with Charlotte Verhulst all season long. We'll probably be seeing that once more, but as far as offense, Hampel's role is definitely going to improve. So that's what I see in the offense, and you also get Caitlyn Hart as well.
I agree, and I think at that point, someone you shouldn't forget is Caitlyn Hart in the sense of this season, she really wasn't able to get as much recognition as she did last season because she had a remarkable start, going on Sports Center for her incredible behind-the-back goals for consecutive weeks. And this season, she still put up respectful numbers and was still named to the all-rookie team, considering this was her first full season. And, she finished with, just taking a quick look here, 41 points, 27 of those being goals. And, of course, that gets overshadowed when you have a 100-point player in Taryn O'Miller and a 70-goal scorer in Allie Kennedy. But with those two gone, I wouldn't be shocked if Caitlyn Hart is going to be the heart of the offense next season, no pun intended, just because, again, of her dynamic play style, especially with the goal scoring. She, I think, is now Kennedy gone, the best goal scorer on this team in terms of finding ways to score and picking different locations. She is able to do so many different ways with her stick. It's really reminiscent of the O'Miller sisters and their ability to score from any angle. And again, finishing with 27 goals is already a good start. And I also wouldn't be surprised if the Seawolves get a few transfers next in the upcoming season to kind of fill the holes there.
Well,
it worked pretty well getting Kaylee Huff this season, and I don't remember if this is her last season or not.
Well,
but
it worked. Yeah, this is definitely her last season. I think,
but it worked out. It worked out well for her, especially in the postseason, where coming after Kennedy and Taryn, she was really the Seawolves' best player overall because of her defensive ability, pressuring and trapping the opposing offenses as well as scoring.
Well, she plays midfield, so that's pretty much how you see that.
Is the beauty of it. Every time you think, what are they going to do when Courtney Murphy graduates? What are they going to do when Kylie Oldmiller graduates? What are they going to do when Taryn Oldmiller graduates? What are they going to do when Allie Kennedy graduates? There's always somebody there. And so that's the magic of the program. The one thing I will say, though, is that another thing that Joe Spleen is good at is that if he doesn't have the production on one end, he'll get it from somewhere else. I'm not just talking about offensive production. If he doesn't have as much offense as he's had in past years, he'll shore up the defense. He'll make adjustments. So, the experiment continues with him.
I think.
And they got lucky a little bit. Well, actually, everybody did. Everybody did because of the extra year of eligibility, and everybody benefited from it, not just Stony Brook.
But that's the number one team in the nation right now.
Yes. At some point, you're going to be going past that. That they're going to eventually graduate. Then what do you do? When everybody's at normal depth again. That's the thing that has a lot of Stony Brook fans scratching their heads. If this was the time, this was the time to finally break through when you have all that firepower concentrated. You'll never get that chance again. And they weren't able to do it. That's frustrating, but that doesn't mean they won't have another chance. The whole point still is that they're going to be, well, first of all, the graduates are thinking missed opportunity, no doubt about it. But everybody else on the team is too. And as, I guess, time heals all wounds and they start for the next season, everything like that, they'll forget about it. But right now, I guarantee you that's what they're thinking. We had the team. Remember that 2006 Met advertising slogan? The team, the time. This was the team. This was the time.
Yeah, and it's sad because in that case, they really didn't recover from the loss to the Cardinals and then the following year to Florida at the close of the regular season until the World Series team in 2015. And that wasn't even a full year of great baseball. That was a great second half of the team getting hot. So I agree that, the upcoming season expectations, I think, should be tempered slightly. But at the same time, there's enough, I think, young talent there, as we touched on, Caitlyn Hart, Ellie Macera, Jaden Hampel. Defensively, Claire Levy, Charlotte Verhulst, the tandem of Cameron Halso and Haley Hunt, where, you can still expect these girls to be a top 15 team at least. And I'd say a top 10 ranging from the 6 to 10 mark. And you're right, losing Kennedy, losing O'Miller is huge. And for the Sea-Wolves, that next step is going to be finding the next Kennedy, the next O'Miller, that next duo or trio or whatever.
Or figuring out a way to play without them.
Exactly. And still succeeding.
Yeah, you're not going to get machine gun-like offense necessarily. You have to understand that those players are among the most talented anywhere, let alone Stony Brook. And one may still walk away with a Tewaaraton. So, even you break through that glass ceiling, forget about it. Albany did with the Thompsons. But look at Albany, too. Albany men, perfect example. They were number one all year. They did get to the Final Four that year. But even then, they didn't win at all. So, the America East in men's lacrosse, and we can segue into that briefly, is not necessarily, especially right now, a mid-major conference because they had 4 ranked teams this year. And they're formidable now. And not only are they the traditional powers like Stony Brook, Albany, UMBC, good, but you add Vermont to the equation now. And you've got legit schools that can face anybody. They still have to get past a certain level where they can take on a Syracuse routinely. We were at a point in 2010, 2011 where we could go toe-to-toe with the number one team in the country. Didn't beat them, but lost by 1 goal twice. And the second time in overtime. So it can be done. An America East team can be that good. But routinely, though, they'll go up against the Syracuse. Albany will go to Syracuse. They play Syracuse all the time in their non-conference schedule. They'll get beat up. I mean, I'm trying to remember the last time Albany beat Syracuse, if they ever have.
I don't believe they have.
I don't believe they have. Okay, how do you get the number one ranking and you can't beat the top teams in your region? And that's one of the reasons the traditionalists are going to keep looking down their noses at the America East, men and women, for that reason. They don't routinely beat the absolute pinnacle teams. They'll beat top 10 teams. They'll beat top 20 teams. They'll beat ranked teams all the time. But, they won't beat a Hopkins. They won't beat a Syracuse. Actually, the women did beat Hopkins once already. Correction on that.
The men's team have beaten Syracuse twice, lost 11. Their last win coming in 2013, by the way. 16-15 win.
Okay. So, you have to beat the traditional powers and challenge them. You have to be on the same level as the other ACC teams when they face Syracuse. Syracuse wins most of the time, but they can occasionally be knocked off their pedestal. And once you're in that group, so to speak, you get more respect come tournament time in terms of the seedings because, let's face facts, when you're number one all year and you get a 5, your path to the Final Four is that much more complicated, and it was. And the Seawolves fell short that year. You get an 8 this year. Do you think you're better? Take a look at those teams in the bracket. How many of them on the top 8 do you think Stony Brook is better than? But on the flip side, move them up to a 6 till they beat Syracuse. You move them up to a 7 till they beat Northwestern.
That is definitely still hard to say that Stony Brook can get past because even so, you know how great Stony Brook has been this season, but I still do honestly believe that of course, those teams are better. They have proven that this year. And Syracuse already pretty much kicked Stony Brook's butt in the Carrier Dome early this season.
What happens in February stays in February. That's one of the reasons why I thought they had a good chance yesterday. And they did.
For a while, they proved it. That's right.
Yeah, they proved it. Yeah, Stony Brook proved that they deserve to be in a conference that's better than them, even though that might never happen.
Yeah,
the problem is the whole school has to upgrade.
Yeah, and again, too, they showed. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Nope, you go.
I'm just confused, really, because I mean, like, as far as I'm concerned, not all of the sports programs at Stony Brook have to be in the same conference.
Well, you also got to remember, too, with the CAA in particular, it's just one example, this being the most often brought up one. You have a Hofstra in the area, so, the likelihood of having two Long Island teams in the same conference is none, just because Hofstra, especially trying to get a team to join the CAA or something like that, just not going to let it happen. Not only that, but Stony Brook has been an America East team for so long now that, the process for them to leave will only be that much harder because of, again, of how much success they found here in the American East in so many sports, lacrosse, baseball, soccer, women's soccer especially, just to name a few. And, it's something where, again, for Stony Brook, they could prove they could get top seeds by, again, it goes back to kind of beating everyone else and also hoping that you got a committee that is a bit more partial towards the non-power teams compared to the power teams, which didn't go in Stony Brook's favor a few years ago. But what are you going to do? And it also goes to the future again, and for the Seawolves to keep, the blocks that falling apart now with, again, Terrell Miller, Ali Kennedy gone, amongst others. So now you got to rebuild it and plan ahead for next season to beat those teams that are going to be a challenge for you.
So here's what I'm thinking. I mean, I remember talking about this right after this election show 2 weeks ago. From what I've judged of the teams that were in the tournament and who lost just recently ended up, the way I see it, Stony Brook's record, if Stony Brook Women's Lacrosse was a member of the ACC this year, then their season probably would have ended up the same way as Duke's did. Duke was 9-7 going into the NCAA tournament, but they were still given a 7th seed because they stuck around with all of their ACC rivals during the regular season and despite losing in the first round of the ACC tournament. We know that we do believe Stony Brook can do the same thing as well. Duke won the 7th seed, lost in the quarterfinal as well as Stony Brook against a team that was a higher seed than them. Of course, Duke did have an early lead until Northwestern pretty much came back big time and crushed the Blue Devils eventually. But the fact is, the way Duke plays in the ACC is pretty much how I think Stony Brook.
Yeah, this women's team has definitely shown they're capable of that. And unfortunately, they didn't get to face Duke this season. But, that's something to look forward to potentially for the next couple of seasons. And, this is, again, one of the cool things, especially for the women's lacrosse program, is seeing them face so many, of these top caliber teams. Syracuse, Northwestern, Maryland last year, UNC twice. It's awesome to see. And, since 1035, going to segue to baseball. Before that, again, is talking about the future of the Seawolves. There's a few incoming players who really look like they're big things expected for them the moment they step on campus. And, kind of looking at the recruit list available online, and you can look it up for Stony Brook Women's Lacrosse team. There's two in particular I want to kind of mention and put a spotlight on. First up would be Peyton Blodow of St. Paul, Minnesota. And she's coming in as a defensive midi and a draw control specialist. She's someone who began playing lacrosse back in 2nd grade on a boys team, made the varsity team going in 8th grade, and was a top 5 goal scorer, points scorer, and led the team in assists. And she works mainly around the crease, but, really she looks like someone who can score from anywhere and has multiple athlete experience, multiple sport experience by also playing hockey in high school. And then, of course, someone who I think is really going to shine next season for the Seawolves, even as a freshman, it's Jordan Forte coming out of Huntington. I mean, I'd be stunned if she doesn't earn a starting or at the very least significant playing time, a la Ellie Macera or Jaden Hampel this season. I mean, she's been playing lacrosse since she was 4 years old and led the Huntington High School junior varsity team with 53 goals and 19 assists as an 8th grader. Okay, it's absolutely remarkable that to see kind of lacrosse ingrained in her blood, and she's really been able to shine. Won so many accolades, especially as the Rookie of the Year in Suffolk County, as a freshman, and the Unsung Hero Award in D1 for Suffolk County. So, the future is still bright. You're still getting some top caliber players under a Joe Splina system where, they're going to be a top 10 team at the very least to start next season. And from there, it's going to be up to them to prove where they stand amongst the best of the best in the NCAA. But, from one team to another, it's time now to kind of focus on the baseball team of Stony Brook and their expectations heading into the America East Championship Tournament. Matt.
What was that? Sorry.
Yeah, it's just to focus on the baseball team and their expectations heading into the championship
first
tournament.
Of all, they get the top seed. They earned that. And what's also interesting is that they didn't let their foot up off the gas. And I was watching the Knicks post game. That's what I was trying to follow what's going on.
Right.
We'll get into that later. But the whole thing about it is I just want to make sure I get the schedule correct. Get that in front of me. But Binghamton, you know how I feel about Binghamton. Binghamton has been a historical thorn in Stony Brook's side. Even though the head-to-head favors Stony Brook, Binghamton finds ways to ruin Stony Brook's day. They took 3 out of 4 at Binghamton, and that was a concern of mine. And they ended up clinching at UMBC last weekend, clinching the top seed. So everything's working according to plan. Now, I told you guys on text earlier tonight that, okay, we're guaranteed to play 2 games. Win the first one, depending on which, and then we go into the winner bracket, and if we lose a bracket. The Seawolves, every time they played in the America East tournament, they have swept their way into the NCAAs. Every time they've won. They've never lost a game and then won. So they have pitching depth in case that happens, which is good. The problem that they have, and we've been talking about this ad nauseum week after week, and then I'm going to check the box scores from this weekend to see if it improved at all.
Oh, it did.
It did. You know where I'm going.
Oh, yeah.
It's the bullpen because if you only need to win 3 games in a row to advance, you only need 3 starters, which means your 4th guy could be a long reliever, could add another arm to the bullpen if needed. So that's good. Where do you use them? Especially when you don't know if you're going to need a 4th guy. That's why they pay Matt Sink the big bucks. And also, why he's been doing it for 30 years. He's figured things out. But the great thing about it is 2 things have taken place now. Number 1, the offense, which was moribund the first half of the season, is clicking. They won 7-1 and 15-3 yesterday, lost 5-4 and won 6-3. Correction, on Friday, and then lost 5-4 and won 6-3 yesterday. Didn't play today. So everything looks good. All the pieces are in place. And then I'll bring up 2011 because that team was a juggernaut. Because it was a 2012 team plus Nick Tropiano. And Tropiano won his first game, and then they lost the next 2 because their hitting just died. That's the thing I fear from this team, that everything that's clicking right now seems to be getting hot at the right time. You lose any of it, you're done.
Absolutely. And that's why this weekend it was so key to get not only just the bullpen, but those potential role players, those backup guys you may need to turn to in a clutch scenario. A lot of not only playing time, but also experience and kind of getting them prepared for the postseason. Chris Hamilton, John Tuchillo, Jared Milch, they know what's up. This ain't their first rodeo. They're already champions. Okay. They know what to expect at the upcoming season. But for guys like take a Johnny Decker who missed a lot of the season and came in this weekend to get some time defensively, for a Stan Lutner at short or an Evan Fox, going out of left field, or Brett Paulson, for example, another guy who missed a lot of time, and the bullpen especially, a lot of underclassmen there. This was really the weekend for them to get that experience. And while I suggested, and it wasn't done, where they used, an opener for this weekend, there's a lot of bullpen being used, and for the most part, they did a pretty good job. Didn't really only surrendered a couple of runs. Sharkey gave up 2 in the 15-3 win, but really other than that, the bullpen, I thought it was good for them to get a lot of experience, getting guys like Ledbetter, Patterman, Ben Farrell, Adam Erickson, who got the save in the 6-3 win yesterday. So, that's going in, especially to the conference tournament, where any one of those pitchers can be called on at any moment, try to salvage the Seawolves out of a situation. It's big.
Now, the Seawolves have a long history of depending on great starting pitching performances to get them where they need to go. And that's what they're really counting on. They need their starters to go deep, bullpen notwithstanding. Now, also, another event that happened on Saturday is that Maine had to win a doubleheader to get into the tournament and face Stony Brook on Thursday. They did. Okay, so trailing 5-3 entering the final inning, the Black Bears are down their last strike when sophomore Connor Goodman, remember that name, delivered a 2-run walk-off single to win the first of 2 must-wins on Saturday. So this is a team with their backs to the wall came through, and it's Stony Brook's first opponent. Talk about getting hot at the right time.
Mm-hmm.
Not going to be a cakewalk.
No,
they're not going to go beat these teams into the ground. Now, I talked about Binghamton. Right. Binghamton didn't make the tournament, which is good because, again, that long history. But Maine also causes problems for Stony Brook. Now, the other game, the second game of Thursday, they're playing 2 games on Thursday, 2 games on Friday, 2 games on Saturday, and an additional game on Sunday if needed. And the reason why they do that is that Joe Nathan Field has no lights. If it had lights, there'd be a third game at night. But because the loser bracket game would probably be at night on Thursday. So it would actually cut a day off the tournament. So Stony Brook, Maine, Albany, and JIT. What did JIT do to Stony Brook?
Why, they won the series last time out. And we're the lone team to beat the Seawolves in the conference series this season.
Thank you very much.
Got it.
Because, you got what-ifs all over the place. One, Albany's always Albany. So Stony Brook does beat Maine, and they face the winner of Game 2. And then either Albany or NJIT, and NJIT could cause them trouble. This is not going to be an easy tournament, even though the Seawolves have proved themselves to be the class of the conference. Because down the stretch, they face some challenges. Now, this is the way Matt Sink likes it. He wants these guys to face challenges, just like Joe Spallina does with his team and all the other coaches. But he wants them to cut their teeth on, face a little bit of adversity when it doesn't count as much. So you're ready when it does. Like I've always said, I'd rather lose in December than in March. You don't want losing the regular season. undefeated's overrated. I mean, Tom Brady, okay, 18-1. And he'll always remember that one Super Bowl ring that got away, that undefeated season that got away.
He said it on paper that he traded 2 of those Super Bowl rings for an 18-0 season.
Yeah, he didn't get it. Thanks to Eli Manning and the Giants and David Tyree, and we know the story. Remember, we're all Giant fans around here. In any case, has Coach Sink released the starting rotation yet? He generally doesn't do it.
No, nothing yet.
Doesn't like to tell the guys too far in advance when they're going to pitch.
Right. Really kind of up to speculation at the moment. But from what we can tell, I mean, you got to assume that Nick DeGennaro is going to get a start Thursday or Friday. Really, to me, it could be any one of the 3 between Turcotte, Milch, and DeGennaro, because all 3 of those guys have pitched remarkably well. 3 of the best in the conference, and amongst the top 10, not only in wins, obviously, but also in major pitching categories, strikeouts, innings pitched, etc.
So you're not going to know till the night before.
That's right. And even then, it could change.
Tournament time.
With the pitch rotation here, it really could change the day of, because at the start of the season, Jared Milch was the definitive ace. Sam Turcotte came in and really pitched lights out for much of the season, and Nick DeGennaro right behind him as well. He started out as a 4, if you remember correctly, and then got bumped up to the 3 over Brian Herman. So to me, I think that's going to be a rotation, and Herman is going to be the long relief guy in this situation. Although, again, DeGennaro was the former closer just a couple of years ago, which is now Adam Erickson's role.
Well, here's the other thing. If you're not committed to a rotation, you can put in anybody you want, and then the next guy has to step up.
That's right.
So, for example, Turcotte starts game 1, goes 3 innings, gets knocked around a little bit. You bring DeGennaro in there, and all of a sudden, the complexion of your rotation looks completely different. And that means, well, first of all, Coach loves having the flexibility.
We saw it this weekend alone. He experimented with the lineup, even though it was the end of the season, bumping Giordano down to the 3 spot and using Stan Lupner as leadoff guy.
Oh, I believe that. Well, first of all, games. I know you guys don't like me saying they're meaningless, but they are, because they have no bearing on where Stony Brook is in the standings. They've already clinched. So you rest your starters, you move people around the lineup, you experiment a little bit, and it's the reward for clinching relatively early versus clinching late like Maine did. But, like I said, you got to watch out for Maine, because Maine's hot. Maine had to win a doubleheader to get in, and they did.
Yeah, they've gotten hot at the right time, Matt and Zach. Looking at their last 7 games, they were victorious in 5 of them to close out the season. And they, pitching-wise as well, they are the second-best team behind Stony Brook. They're second-best in ERA. They've been up 4.73. The Seawolves are leading the conference with 3.81. They've given up the second least amount of hits, earned runs, strikeouts behind Stony Brook. And they got a good hitter as well. They got a couple of really conference award-winning caliber players. First in hitting with Sean Lawler, who leads the America East with batting average at .387 and is among the top 5 in slugging, on-base percentage, RBIs, and then pitching-wise as well, with Nicholas Sinicola. Where really, to me, it's between him and the Stony Brook guys for that Pitcher of the Year award. He has a 2.26 ERA, which is the best in the league, and is behind Turcotte or DeGennaro in wins at 6-3 this season with 5 complete games.
There you go. Your game 1 opponent.
And
with Stony Brook's history, they don't advance unless they sweep. Now, of course, it's the first time for everything. But fact of the matter is, it took the 2012 team to overcome that. Because that's the only time they've ever won a playoff round, a tournament, having lost one game. Coral Gables Regional in 2012 down in University of Miami, and the Super Regional against LSU. And that's the only time they've ever done it. But this team has the depth, thanks to added eligibility, that they might be able to pull it off if they had to. Let's hope it's not necessary. Maine versus Stony Brook, 11 a.m. first pitch, 10:45 here in WUSB, live from Joe Nathan Field, the way we like it. Don't have to travel, right in our backyard. For the first time since 2012, by the way, because the American East went to neutral sites after that, and high seed. And then they went to high seeds, and Stony Brook wasn't a high seed. And then there was, even before that, there was at high seeds, but the high seed had to have lights, and it's always been a mixed bag. But they went back to the high seeds last couple of years, and Stony Brook has earned the right to host, and they're not so picky about lights anymore. And besides which, sun sets at 8. And if it does go to extra innings, well, you can always call it off due to darkness. I'm trying to remember that last time that ever happened. When a game was called due to darkness at Joe Nathan Field.
I couldn't tell you, but the game started at 11 and 2:30, so exactly. Maybe after that, I'd be stunned if that happened.
Yeah. So, if Stony Brook wins against Maine on Thursday, they will get the late game on Friday. The loser bracket, which means if they lose to Maine, they will face the loser of Game 2, which is Albany and NJIT, also at Joe Nathan Field after the Stony Brook Maine game. The loser bracket, they play on the 11 in the morning, 10:45 if we have to air it. Of course, if Stony Brook loses that game, they're done. If they win that game, then they have to play the winner of Game 1, which would have been Maine again at 2:30. So on Friday, if Stony Brook loses on Thursday, we could end up doing 2 games. Saturday. No. If Stony Brook loses on Thursday, they play the next day at 11 a.m. If they win that game, they got to play Maine again because Maine would have beaten them in Game 1. So now if they win that game, it goes to Saturday. The winner of Game 4 versus winner of Game 5, that's the late game on Saturday. And the winner of Game 3, which was the loser. Wait a minute.
Right, that gets bumped down. That's on Saturday. The American East different format this year.
They got something confusing here. Because open up the American East page.
I see it. It says...
Page. Yeah, it's a little confusing here because it says Game 1 is Stony Brook, Maine. Game 2 is Albany, NJIT. Okay.
That's
the
Thursday
loser
for
bracket is Friday morning. The winner bracket, okay. Winner of Game 1 versus winner of Game 2. It says winner of Game 3. So, okay. So it's only one game on Friday either way. Okay,
Yep.
We corrected that. Okay, so if Stony Brook wins on Friday, either way, they play Saturday morning.
Correct.
Or Saturday afternoon. Because it would be winner of Game 4 versus winner of Game 5. If they win on Friday, if they win Thursday and Friday, then they play the late game Saturday. They may have to play 2 games on Saturday. They may have to play yet another game on Sunday if they lose one game. Now, we got it straightened out. double elimination tournament, your best bet is to listen to the games or watch some American East TV, but listen to the games because we're on the call. And just follow us because we will know by the end of the game where the Seawolves or who the Seawolves are going to be playing next and when. Because that's your best bet, because otherwise you'll just get confused. Double elimination tournaments are like that. Having to explain that to the rest of the radio staff is something that I've had a lot of experience doing and have had mixed success. So, there you go. The American East Tournament. Now, the same format applies to the first round of the NCAAs, which would be the following weekend. And the Seawolves have a history now. This is what I'm saying about women's lacrosse, okay? When the Seawolves baseball team gets into the NCAA, they're not automatically a 4 seed in the regionals anymore. They could get a 3. Reason why is because they went to Omaha all those years ago. They broke through. So they get a little bit of extra respect. Anybody other than Stony Brook coming out of the American East is an automatic 4. Stony Brook, if they win this tournament, may get a 3.
It's reminiscent of a couple years ago where the same thing happened, and they started out against, I believe, Texas.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. Stony Brook got a 3. Why? Because they're now in the establishment, so to speak, having been to a College World Series. It's a completely different bunch of players. It's a completely different bunch of players they're playing against. But because Matt Sank has been the coach for 30 years, he's been to Omaha, he's won National Coach of the Year, he gets a little bit of extra respect. And that's one thing that bothers me about women's lacrosse is that Joe Spallina has been repeatedly in the thick of things with his program, and he doesn't get that. And I think it's going to take a trip to the Final Four before he finally does.
Yeah, agreed. And even so, for all that he's accomplished too, it's been interesting to say the least. How comparing those two, especially in Sync and Spallina, how especially across those different landscapes of the sports, we see that treatment. And again, it's also it's two different sports. You're right. There's still that respect factor that goes a long way. And it's something that we still see Spallina fight for, even within the American East. When you see the Coach of the Year award not go to the guy who's kept the team undefeated for 5 years.
What was Rutgers' record? Okay, let me just look at the schedule here. Because they were 7-9. They were 5-7 in conference. They didn't win their tournament. They got beat 24-14 by Northwestern. And yet, they got into the NCAA tournament as an at-large, which they may not have gotten into if the Ivies were participating, by the way. Okay, but they earned their right to be there because they did beat Drexel, they did get a win, and then got beat by Stony Brook. But look at that record. A losing record, and you get to the NCAA tournament on at-large? That's all respect. About respect. And the respect your conference has, and the respect for the schedule you play. Because who do you play? Penn State. You beat Johns Hopkins. You beat Ohio State twice. Okay. Lose twice to Michigan. And you lose twice to Northwestern. You lose by 2 goals to Maryland. You beat Hopkins again. You beat Penn State again. You beat Maryland in your last regular season game. You beat Ohio State in the Big Ten tournament, and you get stomped on by Northwestern in the final. But that's, in a good conference, no doubt about it. But that record is crap.
No, absolutely. And again, kind of turning it back to the baseball side of things as well, Sink, his pedigree, his success, that legacy, that's respect right there in and of itself from the rest of the Americans, where they know not only is a record shower, Stony Brook setting a conference record for the most wins in a single season, regular season at 25. But again, just with that pedigree of success, everyone knows Stony Brook is the team to beat, not only women's lacrosse, but also baseball in the conference tournament. So you beat them, and odds are you're probably going to be hoisting that title at the end of the postseason. So,
but you're only going to get a 4 in the regional.
Yeah.
You're only going to get a 4. Because if you're not Stony Brook and you're representing the America East, sorry. But
yeah, so
it just shows you it's an additional, I wouldn't call it an intangible, it's an additional factor that you have to read between the lines to get, or just look at Rutgers' schedule. But I'm glad I brought that up because that is an extreme example of a team that is part of the establishment, so to speak, and gets probably more respect than their due simply because of the competition they face on a daily basis compared to, let's say, Stony Brook in the America East. Well, you haven't lost a game in 5 years because you're good and the rest of them aren't any good. You're supposed to win those games. Let's see what you guys do in the Big Ten. Well, actually, based on what Rutgers did, I think Stony Brook can go 500 in the Big Ten easy with half their team injured.
No, I wouldn't go that far. But in any case, it is top of the hour here at WUSB, Matt.
WUSB Stony Brook. It is the sports section. And when we went to air, we were watching the post game, and we have to lead with this.
Yep.
Because Madison Square Garden was at near full capacity as the Knicks took on the Atlanta Hawks in Game 1 of the first round of the NBA playoffs. And I will tell you this. I probably would not have been there anyway because of the show here. But I can tell you that playoff atmosphere in Madison Square Garden, whether it's the Rangers or the Knicks, is unlike anything else you will ever experience. It is it defines electric.
Oh my gosh. It's been so long since you really hear what crowds are like. And even so, crowds were still there at Madison Square Garden, albeit a couple thousand fans. But you're absolutely right. I mean, they're looking at all the games as well this postseason so far the past couple of days for the NBA. I mean, listening to the crowd, just even take the Nets and Knicks. That Nets crowd, it took them a long time to wake up. It really wasn't until the second half when the Nets started to go on a roll offensively when the crowd kind of woke up.
The entire first half.
Yeah, that's true. We'll get to that. But for the Knicks, not only were they rocking from the moment they set foot, even before the game, if you just hear it on the pregame while they were doing their intros, you could hear the crowd from outside the arena just going ballistic. Just at thought of entering the building. And then obviously at tip-off, they were electric. And the whole game, there were more people on their feet than there were sitting down. I mean, it was incredible to see. Really almost brought a tear to my eye. That just how, not only loud, but how passionate they were. I thought I could hear them from my house back here in the city. That's how loud they were. I mean, I just couldn't believe that a crowd could be that loud. It's been so long since, we've heard that. Because of the limitations the pandemic has implemented.
I've told you a story about Larry Johnson's 4-point play.
Right.
There's even a video of it of how the crowd just explodes. They all jump to their feet instantaneously when the ball goes through the net. It was just amazing, and I definitely told you this story. I was in the upper press box, and I was about to do a live report from the game over the phone and waiting for my cue to go on the air. And I couldn't hear the other end of the phone because the crowd was so loud. I had to go underneath the table to cut down enough noise so I could hear my cue. And then I could say, Larry Johnson just hit a three-pointer and got fouled, et cetera, et cetera. So I had never seen the Garden that loud, and I'd seen it loud for other reasons and in other occasions in the playoffs, because the Knicks were in the playoffs regularly back in those days.
Right. Often was a lot of good occasions, but
yes. But when the Knicks, let me put it this way. Who was it on the Atlanta Hawks coaching staff, the coach himself, got fined $25,000 by the NBA because he said the NBA wants the Knicks in the playoffs. Well, duh. The NBA will make its money whether the Knicks are good or not. The NBA still really likes it when the Knicks are good. And you can run down the list of reasons. Reason number one is that New York is still the largest market, whether you like it or not. Reason number two is that the NBA is based there. So NBA execs like it. And reason number three, it's an established team, one of the originals. So NBA wants to market the Knicks outside the United States and in China and all over the world. And well, they buy Knicks jerseys, even if the Knicks aren't any good. But if the Knicks stay bad for too long, like they have, they start losing their relevance. And the fans love their Lakers. LeBron James, Giannis Antetokounmpo can play in Milwaukee. That's okay, because his endorsements and stuff like that doesn't matter where he plays. LeBron was in Cleveland. It didn't matter. Miami didn't matter. Okay. Would the NBA have liked seeing LeBron in Knicks uniform? It wasn't absolutely necessary, but way, way back in 1999, on the other hand, David Stern was accused of greasing the skids a little bit to enable the Knicks to obtain Latrell Sprewell, despite the fact that Sprewell was public enemy number one for choking P.J. Carlesimo. But Sprewell turned out to be a final puzzle piece in a team that went to the NBA Finals. So, yeah, the Knicks took advantage. And Dave Checketts used to work directly for David Stern before he got the Garden job. But he got caught in all kinds of craziness. But on the other hand, the Knicks haven't been any good since he left. So you tell me. But Checketts, this is before the Dolans took over. The Knicks were owned by large companies. Gulf and Western, which owned Paramount back in the day. ITT Sheraton. And then Cablevision, the Dolans, eventually bought the Knicks. But they always had some kind of corporate shill for a CEO. And therefore, he didn't act like an owner. He acted like someone who was hired by somebody else to run the whole franchise, or both franchises, I should say, run the Garden. So it was a completely different dynamic. But that's what it was like back then.
And again, it's incredible, too, with that, seeing how they are now. And, I don't want to say Dolan's hands-off approach, but, it's evident that seeing Tom Thibodeau really step up, first take the coaching role, and then step up there as a leader for New York and for, those young talents really benefit the team. Again, turning one of the worst teams in the NBA, one of the worst defensive teams especially, into one of the best. And tonight was step one to kind of prove that, hey, Knicks are going to be here for a long run. And they did a lot of things right, but they just didn't do enough to take that game against Atlanta. What was a nail-biter to the very end?
No, they didn't. And the Hawks felt, because they had identical record, and this was being mentioned during the game, the Hawks had an identical record, 41-31, and they felt they were being overlooked because, like they said, the NBA wanted the Knicks to be in the playoffs. But this was a message game for them, saying, number one, we're just as good as they are. Number two, we're not going away. And number three, don't take anything for granted here, because this series could go a long way.
Absolutely. And it also was going to be close to the get-go, but especially here in New York, I think a lot of folks expecting both New York teams to kind of coast into the conference finals. And I think it was a good wake-up call, to show that Knicks are there. They're a real good team. But, this is a team, the Atlanta Hawks, who were beat 3 times in a row by New York earlier this season. They
Which
got
is one of
a
the
big
reasons
victory.
why the Knicks are the 4 and they're the 5.
That's right. Despite having the same record, the Knicks won them winning the regular season series got them the 4 seed. And with that as well, it kind of goes to show, all right, as the Hawks, it's them saying, we don't have home court advantage, so we're going to have to capitalize on the road. And that's the way to do it. You got to at least split those games on the road so that you can try to get back-to-back wins when you're in your home arena.
Exactly. You split the first 2 games at the very least, as the Islanders did. We'll get into that in a few. But you split the first 2 games because you take away the home court advantage, because you just took a game on their court, and you had to win one road game in order to win the whole thing anyway. So now you just have to win your home games in order to advance. So that's what they did. They're successful at doing. The one thing, Mike Vaccaro, who you know is a columnist for the New York Post and has been a guest on the sports section before, and I went to high school with him. But on Vaccaro's Facebook page, somebody said, same old Knicks, and I'm like, what, are you kidding? Did you watch that game? It was a toe-to-toe matchup all the way through.
Absolutely. And with that, too, I think
you had to be happy with the effort.
Agreed. And really, that being the effort, I'd say the effort of the bench. I mean, of the 105 points scored, 64 of those came off the bench of New York. And a big reason for that, too, was the play of Alec Burks. He led the team with 27 points, as Derrick Rose as well was after him with 17. That's right. A lot of them was the fourth quarter, and again, it was a back and forth quarter. There was an opportunity for the Hawks to run away with it halfway through before Alec Burks hit a 3 that kind of started stacking points in the favor of the Knicks to get a lead late in the game. But yeah, again, seeing the Knicks, I think it was such a statement win too, because we're talking about how loud the crowd was. Matt, there was one time that entire game where the crowd was silent. That was after Trae Young came running through the lane and hit a floater with less than a second to go at Madison Square Garden. I mean, his in-pain ability was unbelievable, and took the crowd's enthusiasm as well.
Well, you know what? This wasn't the only game today, or the only game this weekend, that was kind of like this. Philadelphia, Washington went in overtime. Right. Okay. Phoenix beat the Lakers by 9. But going back to yesterday, now we'll concentrate on the Brooklyn Nets, even though look at what Milwaukee did with Miami, 109-107. So a few tight games this first weekend of the playoffs. Now, looking at the Brooklyn Nets, talk about coming out in the first half flat. What was it, 0 for 13 from 3?
Yep.
First of all, nobody does that even in the regular season. They look bad. You knew they weren't going to stay that way because of the guys you had on the court. And then they became the Nets again in the second half, 104-93 the final. But, it was rather annoying that it took them that long to get used to playing with each other again.
No, I agree.
Of course, the top 3 guys only were together 8 times this year.
Right. With that as well, I mean, they were also feeding it to Harden and Kyrie a lot. And combined, I think they went something like 6-22 in the first half of action. It was really up to Kevin Durant to kind of salvage the rest of the offense. He led the first half with 16 points and ultimately finished with 32. But even Kevin Durant wasn't his usual self from the post. I mean, he'd go for a turnaround jumper and it'd brick off the iron or the back iron or off the board. And the Celtics, they were getting a lot of opportunities, but I don't think they were able to really gather enough momentum to firmly go on a run, something like a 20-6 run, just as hypothetical, that could really put the dagger in the game early, like we saw the Nets do to Boston several times this season, such as the season opener.
I'll tell you what, though. Okay, I'm just looking at the numbers here. Okay, so you've got 61, 21, 82 points of the, what did we say? 82 points of the 104 the Nets scored yesterday were scored by the big 3. Durant, Irving, Harden.
It's so
Joe
big.
Harris had 10 points. The only other net in double figures. That, while you're happy, you're getting top production from your big 3, that's not going to win you a series. 1 point in 20 minutes from Blake Griffin is not going to win you too many games. Joe Harris needs to touch the ball a little bit more often, I think. Well, also, he made 2 for 6 from 3. Durant was 1 for 8. Kyrie was 2 for 8. And Harden was 2 for 8 also.
There you go. Yeah, they're 4-16.
How the hell did they pull that game off? It tells you something about Boston. Okay. But you put those numbers up against Philadelphia, you're going to get eaten alive.
I think there's 2 reasons. One, of course, going back to Boston, just being unable to really go on a big run. But I think the other reason, too, is while Brooklyn was scoring, I thought one positive take out of it was defensively, they performed a lot better than they had, especially in the start of the season. But I'd even go as far as to say, earlier, I guess last month, when they were in that losing stretch, for example, look at the second half, for example.
All regular season.
Yeah. Honestly, yeah. They held Celtics to 32% shooting in the second half and limited them to 15% from 3. So while Boston, I don't want to say was killing, but was dominating on the 3-point edge in the first half, Brooklyn didn't give them too many opportunities, Durant being a big reason for that in terms of defense, Harris as well, Bruce Brown as well, who had some playing time. They were able to prevent Boston from finding the equalizer from the 3-point range, which they relied heavily on in the first half.
Well, take a look at this. We're talking about abysmal performance from 3 for the Nets, right? From the field. Jason Tatum, 6 for 20. Kemba Walker, 5 for 16. Evan Fournier, 3 for 10. That ain't going to win you much either.
No, Jason Tatum especially because, looking at the team, Matt, is evident the one name, you left out is Jaylen Brown because he's out for the season. He's not coming back. And he was your main or secondary scorer, or at the very least a third scorer behind Kemba Walker and Jason Tatum. He's out. So now, especially if you're Jason Tatum, who had a great end to the regular season, you really have to start off strong and kind of set the tempo for this team. And I thought he did well in the first half. He went 6 of 14 in 20 minutes of action, led the game of 15 points. But again, that second half, the Nets got hot, and there was no answer for the Celtics. And that was evident in Jason Tatum. He only had 7 points for the remaining 24 minutes of that game.
Well, one thing I will predict for Game 2, it won't play that way again.
No.
Because you don't want to have your big 3 become your crutch, because that could be a problem. That was a complaint about getting those guys in the first place, that they would dominate the court and no one else would touch the ball. They can't do that either. They have to distribute a little bit more. And it seemed that the Nets played, I was about to say better, but I don't want to necessarily say that, but definitely well, with 1 out of the 3 or 2 out of the 3, which was most of the time.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say, even with...
Because the Joe Harris's of the world had more opportunities.
Right. That's why, to me, it's really not the end of the world in that sense, where, one of them goes down, they're not obviously going to be better, but they're going to be capable of still being able to score and create opportunities, especially with James Harden running the offense. Bruce Brown stepped up this season, Jeff Green as well. Harden was able to make DeAndre Jordan an effective lob scorer again, like he was in Los Angeles and Dallas, or really just Los Angeles. As Joe Harris, as you said as well. But at the same time, this being the first time in a long time you're seeing that big 3, it does look like Steve Nash, Mike D'Antoni, their offense is going to be, or we're going to feed them the ball a lot, and they're going to have to stay hot or get hot, and we're going to see how far this team goes.
Yeah.
And again, it's an interesting strategy.
We got a taste of what the playoffs are going to be like this weekend.
And I'll say it's very fun, at the very least. It's so good.
Yeah, and with both local teams in it, and both local teams having a good chance of going deep in it, that you really have to like.
Absolutely.
It's rare, extremely rare, when the Knicks and Nets have been good at the same time.
Oh, I was just saying,
when the Nets,
multiple New York teams in the same sport are good at the same time. Mets and Yankees 2000 was, 20 years ago. And that was really the only time they were both, on par with each other. Right. Giants and Jets, I don't remember when they both had a shot at meeting each other in the Super Bowl, at least in this century. Basketball-wise, this is the first time both teams are really this good since 2013-ish. But even then, it was evident that the Knicks were the better team.
Okay, so let's shift gears a little bit to the NHL, because the series with the Penguins is kind of playing out the way we expect it to. Tied 2-2. And what I was saying about the goal scoring on the part of the Islanders was I hope it wouldn't let them down. And so far it hasn't. Knights winning Game 4. And no complaints about Game 4 at all.
Right. That was their best game of the postseason, by far. That was the most dominant performance by either team in the postseason as well. Even though Penguins scored more in Game 3, that was still a very close game until the very end. I don't want to say from the start, but once they got the lead, they held on to that for they held on to it for the rest of the game. And I do just want to add, I think it's a great showing for Ilya Sorokin. Not that Varlamov has played poorly as compared to some of the other goalies in the postseason, but I think Sorokin has really taken the baton, if you would, from Varlamov as the goalie to ride on for the remainder of this postseason. I mean, through the first 2 games, he's looked absolutely phenomenal.
Well, the other thing that I like is that Game 4 is a breakout game for Matt Barzal.
Mm-hmm. Well, I thought you were going to say Oliver Wahlstrom. Goal and assist.
Yeah. They're getting production. I mean, when Anders Lee went down, like I said, that was the concern. How much production would they lose offensively? And so far, they've been able to fill in the blanks here and there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, of course, the series returns. Well, let's talk a little bit more about Game 4 because that was a game that the Islanders just took over in the third period, outscoring the Penguins 2-1. Second period, too, they picked up a couple of goals. But Wahlstrom, of course, a big contributor for that game. That game was clearly dominated, I would say, end-to-end by the Islanders. And
yeah,
I think it's really the first game in this series where they were really in command. The home crowd was there, and they really did turn in. They gave them their money's worth. There's no question about it. Now, could this be the turning point for the series as they go back to Pittsburgh? That's the big question I have right now.
Yeah, that's really tough. And number one, it's that point, they're going back to Pittsburgh. They're not staying in the barn. And, we kind of wonder what difference it would be if it was the other way around. But you're right, that home crowd, you already played a bit of a factor just because of that passion as well. Not to the level of the Knicks fans in MSG, but still, they were very, excited to host the Islanders once again. And they were there, they lived it up through the entire game. And it really, I don't want to say it threw the Penguins off, but it certainly played a bit of a factor. I mean, the Islanders as well just really did well adjusting to the Penguins, especially defensively. And I think a big factor for that is Sidney Crosby. He scored in the first game. He's been held in check since then. And they made it look really easy just to continue targeting and trapping Crosby when he's in a scoring position or he has the puck on his stick. And as a result, they've really been suppressing the Penguins offense, as we saw in yesterday's contest. And another thing as well, they've really capitalized on the Penguins' mistakes. Look at the power play, for example. 5 penalties on Pittsburgh were converted into 2 goals for the Islanders. Virtually back-to-back as well. Yeah, that was the fastest. I think they scored a goal since. Actually, I have the stat here from NHL.com. The fastest they scored since 2002 versus the Toronto Maple Leafs in the conference quarterfinals, and that was 14 seconds long. Yeah, so you want to talk about history.
Yeah, that was Darcy Tucker knocking out Michael Pekka.
Yeah, exactly. And with that as well, too, that's something we haven't seen from the Islanders, being able to capitalize on those mistakes, especially so quickly in that sense. I mean, the last time they scored twice in the same period of multiple power play goals in a playoff game was against Florida back in 2016. That one I remember off the top of my head. But, yeah, it goes to show they've really improved as the season has progressed. And that's going to be a cause for concern for the Penguins, who, their best goal scorer has been held in check by this Isles defense.
And that's what the Islanders have been depending on all season long. But even then, in the regular season, Sid would always find a way, and hasn't yet, which is another little thing that's in the back of your head when they go back
when
to
is it coming? Right. When is it coming? Is it going to be the crowd?
Yeah. When is Sid going to have his breakout game?
The other thing, too, is will the bottom line success, we know how good the fourth line is, but will the third line success, second line success, again, not the Matt Barzels per se, or the Brock Nelsons per se, but those Oliver Wahlstroms, for example, will that success be sustainable again in Pittsburgh? It was a good sign, I thought, even though they lost, of getting the 4 goals against Pittsburgh in Game 3. Because, yeah, they did lose, but that was the most they scored against Penguins, I believe, this season. So, you're starting to see the offense wake up, and scoring that many goals, especially this late in the season, this isn't your first or second time meeting against the Penguins. This is like your 12th or 13th. So this team pretty well and how to counter them. So to me, it's really going to be a battle of getting that breakout offense. You get 4 goals for your team, and odds are you're probably going to beat the other team because you're not going to have much of an offense.
That's right. So, of these other series that have been going on, by the way, we did mention earlier that the Boston Bruins have advanced. So, the winner of, they beat the Capitals, they win the series, and Alex Ovechkin goes home. Tuukka Rask makes 40 saves. Patrice Bergeron scores twice. And the Islanders, if they do get past the Penguins, I think can take the Bruins on. I think that's going to be any playoff series will be interesting, but I think the Islanders do have what it takes to get past them. But the Islanders have to get past Pittsburgh first.
That's true. But again, it was so close, especially late in the season. You're kind of asking yourself, all right, who do you really want to face, Boston or Washington? I mean, even at the end, Boston was really, I don't want to say really dominant, but they had the upper hand over the Isles. That was evident closing out the season. Remember, the Isles were on a really bad ending stretch this season. Once they secured a playoff berth, the team started to fall apart, and I really didn't recover until right now. So this is when they're getting hot again. But for Boston, really, they've always been hot. And I think getting that Game 5 win is a big statement in of itself. Having Tuukka Rask on his A game, David Pastrnak again, getting a goal, another assist, leading the team in points, I believe. Boston looks really good. And this too, a team where offensively, it was Washington who was the better of the two. In the second period alone, the Capitals outshot the Bruins 20-4. But it didn't matter because Rask was on fire and didn't allow any goals to get to the back of the net. As a result, in the third period, Patrice Bergeron was able to make it a 3-1 game. And especially if you're a New Yorker, Ranger fans know, having that hot goalie can definitely take you to the Stanley Cup Finals for 2013.
Oh, yeah, it'd take you all the way.
Yes, same series, Jonathan Quick.
Yep. Jonathan Quick. 2 Stanley Cups, and they rode him almost exclusively. Because talk about a team that couldn't score. Oh, God, those L.A. Kings. And that's one of the reasons why you like how the Islanders are configured based on defense first. Because teams like the Kings have proven it could be done. However, I don't know if the Islanders... Well, actually, no, I take it back. They could very well have a goalie that's as good as Quick was.
I don't know about as good, but it could be as hot. And I'm sure you're referring to Sorokin, because, again, he has looked great. No, he has looked phenomenal through his first couple of games. This, too, his first action in the playoffs. He wasn't with the team in the bubble. He was still in Russia during last postseason. And, he's looked like, you're right, he's looked like a pro on par with Varlamov. And numbers-wise, better than Varlamov, considering he's gotten the 2 victories.
So, yeah, that is definitely a good example to look at. 2012 and 2014. And what they do, they face local teams in both cases. Faced the Devils in 2012 and the Rangers in 14.
Rangers in 14, yeah.
So we got to watch them firsthand. But like I said, Kings, if you took a look at where their offense ranked in the NHL, it was near the bottom. But their defense was always at the top. I remember right around the same time, when the Bruins won their cup, every single player was in the plus column and plus minus, which doesn't happen that often. But that shows you where they were getting their production. That everybody was scoring.
Right. It was like the Lightning last season.
Yeah. Like I said, of course, some former colleagues from NHL.com, 3 friends of mine run their fantasy portion of the site, and they were saying just a few weeks ago that all the forwards on the Lightning you'd want on your fantasy team. None of the forwards on the Islanders.
That's true.
And I know that at least one of them is a hardcore Islander fan. So he's got to, tell the truth. And that's really where things are at. And the same thing happened with the Kings from back then. That the Kings were that weak. Now, here's something that I'm looking at, too, is that, first of all, Colorado was advanced. They swept the Blues. John Tavares has a knee injury to go to boot with his concussion, so not likely to return.
He may not return again, which is a big loss that also makes the acquisition of players like Wayne Simmons and John Thornton that much more significant for Maple Leafs, where it softens the blow. But that said, we know, especially locally, how good John Tavares is. That's the compliment for Austin Matthews. Or when Austin Matthews isn't, up to expectation, Tavares is there to pick it up for the team. So it's going to be interesting with being down one of your 2 best players for Toronto.
But this other Canadian tournament that we're looking at, this other round, Winnipeg-Edmonton. And Edmonton, they've got all the high-powered scoring, but they're down 3-0 to Winnipeg.
It is incredible. You're right. You got Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl. That's all you really got to say. You think they're the team that was up 3-0 and that they've had success against Winnipeg in the regular season. It's just stunning to see them on the brink of elimination. And I really can't believe it. Even though Winnipeg's up 3-0, I really don't feel confident saying they got this in the bag. I need to see it with my own eyes that the Oilers' ineptitude caught up with them again.
Oilers scored 1 goal in their first 2 games, finally scored 4 in Game 3, but Winnipeg scored 5.
And really, they only scored their biggest goal output was 3 goals in the third period, so force in overtime, and they couldn't even get the win there.
So you got them. Let's see, when's their next game? They will be playing
Monday night, so tomorrow.
Really, tomorrow?
Yep.
Game 4? Yeah, Game 4 tomorrow. So they could be out, and they'll be carrying the awards, of course. But here we go again, and poor Edmonton fans. Talk about a team that has had draft pick after draft pick, prospect after prospect, and it's almost like the curse of Gretzky. Well, actually, they did win 1 Stanley Cup after they traded Gretzky, but none since.
Yeah, and it goes again even beyond Connor McDavid on this team. Leon Draisaitl, as we said, Jesse Puljujarvi, Zach Kassian, of course, Kailer Yamamoto, who I thought stepped it up, and then unfortunately, he stepped it up today. Before that, was struggling a bit. It's incredible to think. It's reminiscent to me of Jacob deGrom when you kind of read the stats. Here's one coming from the the hockey stat miner that says that the Oilers have lost 80% of McDavid's career multi-point playoff games. Okay, that's just absolutely remarkable that
How
even
the-
when McDavid's hot, you still aren't able to secure the win.
You know what? It may go back to the whole thing with the Nets. When the big three score 80% of your offensive output, and nobody else, one other player has double figures. They pull the game out, okay, fine, because they did play good defense, but it's not something you want to hang your hat on. You want a more balanced effort.
And again, this too, for the regular season, Mike Smith has had a career resurgence. It was a big reason why defensively the Oilers were just under Toronto in the Canadian division. But, that Mike Smith is long gone. And, Matthew Pearl, Blake Wheeler, Josh Morrissey were big contributors in that Winnipeg win, as they have been all postseason long.
They could be the dark horse coming out of Canada.
Oh, absolutely.
So,
they could be dark horse of the entire race.
That's true. And talk about a city that's waited for it, including several years of not having a team.
That's right.
So it's 11:42, and we had a terrific weekend in the Bronx. I remember, and I mentioned this to somebody, I was at 2 of the 3 games. I wasn't at yesterday because I was busy with the women's lacrosse in the studio. But I was there Friday and today. And the series reminded me of a series way back in 2005 when the White Sox won the whole thing. There was a 3-game set just before the All-Star break. And each team scored 5 runs over the 3 games, but the White Sox took 2 out of 3. This case, the Yankees not only swept the series, but this is a great stat. They've won their last 8 games in which they failed to hit a home run.
Wow.
Prior to that, they lost their last 11 in a row that they failed to hit a home run in.
That's incredible, because this is something that you, Matt, actually touched about a couple weeks ago and at the start of the season as well. And it's that the Yankees aren't a small ball team. They're always home run first. They look at their lineup and it's stacked with home run sluggers and Stanton, Judge, Urshela, Torres. When the team's healthy, obviously, DJ LeMahieu. And you're right, they have been cool on that front, but it hasn't mattered because, this is a week where they've been able to still manage to pull off a couple of walk-offs. And as you said, sweep the other best team in the American East in the Chicago White Sox. Until
today, Aaron Judge had not had a walk-off at bat. And I say a walk-off at bat, I didn't say walk-off hit, didn't say walk-off home run. No walk-offs in his major league career. He has a walk-off walk with the bases loaded today.
Couldn't script it any better.
Getting runs knocked in on singles. And I'm like, this is the good at bats. This is the type of team that we need the Yankees to be if we want them to go deep into the playoffs or go anywhere this year. Because, look, they're going to still strike out a lot. Hopefully they'll cut that down over time. But I even asked Aaron Boone and Aaron Judge the same question. Is this basically part of the development? Early in the season, this team was feast or famine. Now you're working it a little bit better. So that made a huge impression on me because it also meant that they rose up to the challenge the Chicago pitching provided. That they weren't going to get long balls out of these guys. So they better shorten their swings. And they did. And that proves something. I'm waiting to see what the columns on my... Well, actually, that is going to be about the Knicks tomorrow. The Knicks are going to be on the back page forget about it. We're not even no one's even going to think about the series, despite the fact that it was a big, I would call it a turning point, a milestone type of moment in the Yankees season so far.
It's a proving point. I think that's the best way to put it, in the sense of that this isn't a one-dimensional team. And I don't say it's a bad thing the Yankees are one-dimensional. We've seen Yankee one-dimensional teams win World Series. Go back to the early 70s for that. You got sluggers everywhere.
You'd be surprised, though.
Richie Jackson.
You look at the stats in those 1970s teams, they didn't score as many runs as, let's say, the 90s teams, but everybody was scoring runs back then.
Right.
They did rely on excellent pitching, as this team does. This team's pitching is the best it's been in a long time. 35-plus scoreless innings from the starters.
Yeah, that's the other point to really touch on. That's why they've been able to be so successful. Because even though they're not scoring as many runs on average, they're still, the pitching, especially the starting rotation, is holding down the fort, giving up no runs or one run. I mean, to your point, it's tied for the second longest in franchise history, behind a 40-inning stretch in 1932.
Yeah. And 1947, there was a long stretch, too. And those were the days when starters usually finish their games, win or lose.
Right.
There were
every game was a complete game. Right.
But the bullpen was not as heavily relied on night in, night out, or day in, day out back then. First night games weren't until the late 30s. So, yeah, a completely different era, completely different set of circumstances, but still registers. It still this starting rotation is unhittable right now.
It both, and in a literal sense. First off, we'll touch on Garrett Cole, because he improved to 6-2 on Saturday. His ERA this season is 1.81, and he already has 92 strikeouts on the season, the most for any Yankee through his first 10 starts of the season, which originally Al Downing, remember back in the 60s, had that record with 86. But literally
Al Downing
unhittable.
gave up Aaron's 715th home run.
There you go.
The Dodgers, yes.
That's right. But literally unhittable, going back to Thursday, where Corey Kluber pitched the first Yankees no-hitter since David Cohen's perfect game. And if you want to be literal, since Doc Gooden's no-hitter in 96.
That's right. And,
I mean,
talk about stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Did you see that game?
Absolutely.
Oh, my God. The sliders?
Right. It was incredible, though. Yeah, it was incredible to see the break where it started off. It looked like a normal, kind of slider cutting on the outside part of the plate, and immediately just cut in and, catch the inside part. The Texas hitters were left clueless on how to approach Kluber. I mean, they just didn't have an answer. And, usually you have that one standout defensive play when it comes to no-hitters. Really, the standout performance was Kluber, making it unhittable for the Rangers to even get their bats on the ball. I mean, a lot of the bats they hit
one more than minimum.
Exactly.
One guy, that's it.
They walked one guy, and even then, a lot of the hit balls weren't really that hard hit. They were pretty soft ground balls, weak ground balls to the opposite side, or shallow fly balls. There was no great home run robbery like we saw with Burley's perfect game, or, really defining play, a great diving catch or things like that,
Well, the one thing that, first of all, defensive plays, of course, figure big in no-hitters. Luck figures in huge. But first of all, everybody says you got to get to the sixth inning before you start taking it seriously. Okay, fine. But you watch, and I remember watching David Wells' perfect game. I was there for Cones. And
is that Yogi Berra
saw
Day?
The stuff. Yogi Berra Day.
There you
go. Don Larson was in the house. So
that's right. Alaska.
He had the stuff. And the way you can tell, yes, the breaking pitchers, hardly any 3-ball counts.
Yep. Yeah, I think it won the entire game.
Any contact, weak contact, and just pinpoint control and accuracy. When you see that, you say, okay, he's got the stuff to do it. Still need a break here and there to actually do it because that's just the nature of a no-hitter. But the bottom line is you're going to watch something good today. You're going to watch history.
Right.
And that's what you saw with Kluber. That slider was sick. Okay,
absolutely. And again, what a story for him, too. Pitched 1 inning last year with Texas, ironically, where he was shut down due to injury, already a bridge season. So there was a lot of risk. And we remember at the start of the season, kind of hammering in, especially on Cashman, for going out with a guy with such a risk and a background where he is injury prone. And it was almost like he finally got that vindication that it was worth it coming back right there. And with that, it kind of also signified the Yankees are the team to beat now. This looks like a completely different team that got mopped by the Rays at the start of the season. They're only half a game away from first place, which is the first time they were there since the start of the season.
Well, here's another thing. Now you're seeing some depth here because Tyone had a great game today.
Yeah.
So he goes 5 innings, gives up only 2 hits, struck out 4, but his ERA went down a bit. He's down to 5.08. He was so near 6. So Jameson Tyone had a good day. And
Peralta did not.
Again, we continue on. And right. Roldis Chapman did not. But, of course, Aaron Judge bailed him out with a walk. But then it tells you something. It tells you that at this stage of the game, the Yankees are starting to gel.
Yep.
And a lot of the things that we were knocking them for, which, by the way, they're now half a game out of first place. Boston and Tampa Bay are tied. And yes, well, the Yankees get Toronto on Tuesday home. And Toronto's only 4.5 out.
Yeah, that's the top 4 teams. Take out Baltimore, and it's pretty close. And not only that, but you get the Rays to start off June and the Red Sox right after them. So you're getting hot at the right time as you start approaching conference play again within the next 3 series.
Mm-hmm. And Tampa Bay's won 10 in a row.
Yeah.
That's another thing we have to. The Yankees have won 6 in a row. So, not bad. Now, the New York Mets are 2 games over 500. Fortunately, due to the state of the rest of the National League East, that puts them 1.5 games ahead in first.
Yeah, it is the closest race so far. I mean, 3 games are what separates first-place Mets from the 5th-place Nationals. And it's also because the Mets have the least amount of games played as a result of the Nationals missing the start of their season and a couple other games.
Right. But the story with the Mets remains the same. Number 1, can they stay healthy over the long term? And can they stay on top considering how competitive and how close this division is? One piece of good news. Jacob deGrom will start on Tuesday.
Big plus.
That is the best news you can possibly have. He missed 2 starts because of right side tightness, but he did strike out 8 of the 10 batters he faced in Low A St. Lucie in his rehab assignment on Thursday.
Yeah, and
also through a bullpen session today. No problems.
Yeah, that's definitely what you want to hear because, again, you got guys like Taijuan Walker who went down and is expected to come back as well versus Colorado. But even today, Jordan Yamamoto had a poor start, really a poor second inning. He gave up 5 runs to his former team of Miami. And it was almost like universal karma or something, where after the game, it was revealed he had right shoulder soreness, and his future's up in the air. So, the health of the Mets has really been a question mark now. The one silver lining, I think, was shown against Atlanta, where you had kind of these unknowns step up. Thomas Needle, for example, against Atlanta, was the team's hottest hitter and had 5 hits, including a game-winning home run on Tuesday, the game of the 5-4 win. And Jonesy Vargas as well is another guy who, you saw glimpses of him in spring training. He didn't really stand out, but he's been a factor in the Mets staying afloat and not necessarily falling apart in conference play.
So coming up for the Mets, they have the Rockies coming up. So I wouldn't never treat a schedule like they've got breaks in it. But this homestand, first of all, yes, you do have to make hay while the sun shines against the Rockies, and starting off with DeGrom on Tuesday is a good way of doing that. But then you get the Braves over Memorial Day weekend before you start a big Western swing, starting with the D-backs the following Monday. So, again, it really is a case of making hay while the sun shines, because those Western trips are always tough.
Right. And let's say, to their credit, they were able to beat Arizona earlier in the season. It's a couple weeks ago, but that was at home. You're right. Being on the road is a completely different beast. Not only that, but you face the Padres right afterwards. And
4
the Padres,
games.
Yeah. And again, they look phenomenal in what's been a tight race in the NL West between the Dodgers, the Padres, and the Giants, surprisingly.
And then, after a couple of games in Baltimore, you get the Padres back at Citi Field for a weekend. And then 4 against the Cubs.
Yeah, it's really those series against Cubs and the Padres where you really need those guys healthy, and you really got to figure out, again, that identity, for the Mets. The young guys have really been stepping up, so that's good. You got the depth, but, for this week, it's really, I think the big success coming out of it is going to be having all your guys back and healthy and ready to go, as well as seeing Jacob deGrom perform again and live up to par as what he has previously produced.
And maybe they can score a couple of runs for him.
Be nice.
Only
Don't
a
ask for
couple.
much. Right.
He's 3-2 with an ERA under 0.5. Well, hey, Bob Gibson lost 9 games with a 1.12 ERA. One look at DeGrom, you know why. They didn't hit for him. Okay, it is 11:59. Zach, you still there?
Oh, he's not there, but I'll take a look for him.
Well, anyway, but coming up on the schedule, you do, of course, Thursday.
It's only baseball.
Baseball, Joe Nathan Field. America East tournament begins. The top-seeded Seawolves take on the 4th-seeded Maine Black Bears. 10:45 a.m. So breakfast at Joe Nathan Field on Thursday. But on behalf of Zach and also Ken Fermin, I'm Matt Mankiewich. Have a great sports week in the meantime.